I'm Adam Smith. I'm the Chief Scientific Officer at Nobel Prize Outreach. And together with Professor Tiki Pang of the NUS School of Medicine, it's been my very great pleasure to curate the rather extensive program we have today, going through the morning, the afternoon, and the evening. Therefore, it also falls to me to be your guide to what's happening. And it gives me very great pleasure to introduce my colleague, the Chief Executive Officer of Nobel Prize Outreach, Laura Spreckmann, to give the first of our opening addresses. Please join me in welcoming her on stage.
Thank you, Adam. Minister Vivian, Balakrishnan, dear Ambassador Kent Herstedt, Your Excellencies, dear laureates, dear speakers, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Hissier Fouhua, Chairman of the Board of Trustees of NUS, Professor Yo Kai Guan, Senior Vice President, Health Affairs, NUS. Dear students, welcome to the Nobel Prize Dialogue in Singapore. We're pleased to welcome you all to this event. The challenges humanity is facing, short and long term, generate resignation and despair among many. How to address these challenges, how to find motivation when things look dire. How to build a future that gives us hope, a future with health, with well-being for us as individuals, for our society, and for our planet as a whole. For this edition of Nobel Prize Dialogue in Singapore, we're bringing together Nobel Prize laureates, students, and many speakers, and students from all the Asia-Pacific region, actually, to discuss how we envision well-being for us all, and how we can improve your lives. As you know, the Nobel Prize is named after Alfred Nobel. He was a Swedish entrepreneur who, a century ago, invented dynamite and built a business empire. For Alfred Nobel, it was clear that we can shape our future if we make an effort, combining scientific research, peace, and literature. He was convinced that humans can improve their lives, but this doesn't happen just by chance. It takes a continuous quest for knowledge, as well as the ability to collaborate in peace and to make wise, ethical decisions. This sense of agency based on knowledge is what gives us, and not least the next generation, the drive to move forward. With our Nobel Prize Dialogue, we want to stimulate people, especially young people, to engage in science and humanities. We want to promote evidence-based decisions on our great global challenges and make the world a better place. Well, to base decisions on scientific evidence should be quite obvious, but it's not. Unfortunately, both science and peaceful collaboration are being questioned around the world. When these values are being threatened, the Nobel Prize gives us an even bigger symbolic importance. For us who work with the Nobel Prize, this gives us a great responsibility. During the Nobel's lifetime in the 1800s, humanity took big scientific leaps, which brings us back why we're here today. Throughout history, the Nobel Prize has been awarded to those who came up with scientific breakthroughs, who have stopped armed conflicts, or who have helped us to understand who we are as human beings. Our well-being is not only about staying free from disease. It's about moral and ethical issues, about living in harmony with ourselves, with each other, and the planet. When it comes to scientific research, in fact, we don't always know where breakthroughs will come. We need to continuously invest in research, both basic and applied. Human progress requires interaction and freedom to think. Lack of freedom makes innovative people leave or become silent. Interaction and informed dialogue is what we expect today, on stage, among all of you in the audience, and online through our digital channels. Speaking with and learning from each other, we can drive change together. Before I conclude, and on behalf of Nobel Prize Outreach, I would like to thank Professor Yapseng Chong, Professor Tiki Pang, Dr. Raja Kamal, Ms. Su Mei Lee, Dr. Iris Shen, Ms. Sally To, and the NUS Medicine Secretariat team for an inspiring collaboration. To our Nobel International partners, 3M, ABB, Capgemini, and Scania for this friendship and partnership. Ambassador Kent Herstedt and colleagues at the Embassy of Sweden, and all my amazing colleagues headed by Sandra Brandin and Adam Smith. Finally, thank you all so much for attending. Enjoy the session. Please let me introduce Professor Yapseng Chong, Dean of the NUS School of Medicine. Thank you so much.
Okay, may I draw your attention to the slides? You know, as an academic, I can't do anything without PowerPoint, so please look at the slides. So good morning, Dr. Vivian Balakrishnan, Minister for Foreign Affairs Singapore, Your Excellencies, our distinguished Nobel laureates and speakers, esteemed guests, students, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to all of you. I'm honored to be able to start my week in the company of such great minds, young and old, who will together shape the future. You have no idea how relieved I am that the 2022 Nobel Prize Dialogue is finally happening in Singapore. When we first started planning in late 2019, this was supposed to be the 2020 Nobel Prize Dialogue. I suppose this is an appropriate time to use the old adage, better late than never. Let me start by briefly introducing you to the NUS Yonglulin School of Medicine. The school was founded 117 years ago, and over the years we have trained well over 10,000 doctors, including Dr. Benjamin Shears, the second president of the Republic of Singapore, Dr. Margaret Chan, 7th Director General of the World Health Organization, who obtained her master's in public health from our school in 1985. And several of our current cabinet ministers are also NUS Medicine alumni, including our guest of honor today, Dr. Vivian Balakrishnan, who's an ophthalmologist. The theme of today's dialogue is the future we want together. And the organizers have taken great pains to engage the youths of today about the future they want. One that is sustainable, where mental health and well-being is prioritized, a future that is full of possibilities. As temporary stewards of the world today, we are always merely looking after it for the next generation. The youth of today must be prepared to take on the challenges of tomorrow. With advances in public health and healthcare, the youth of today can expect to live a 100-year life. This brings with it both exciting opportunities as well as challenges. Do we want a 100-year life if we are to live 25 of those years in ill health? Can we keep healthy and lead meaningful, productive lives well into our 90s? What can we do to improve health span across the life course? I like to think of a 100-year life in 3 phases: the current old, the future old, and the people in what Mark Friedman calls the midlife chasm. For the current old, we can look at lifestyle modifications to improve health, strengthen social connections to avoid isolation and loneliness, and to keep active by forgetting about retirement and taking on second careers instead. For those in the midlife chasm, it is worthwhile to look at some of the novel, age-retarding strategies being proposed by geoscientists today. Again, lifestyle modifications, although difficult to sustain, has an important place, and they should plan not to retire, but to transition to a second or third career to remain active in their later years. And for the youths who are the future old, this is where we really need to invest. We need to start optimizing their health and human potential in early life by doing everything we can to enhance their executive functioning, as this will enable them to plan better, be disciplined, stay healthy, and be successful. At the same time, we need to expose youths to a broad base of learning and instill in them natural curiosity so they can continue learning and relearning throughout their lives to adapt to our fast-changing world. In this new world, they should expect to have more than one career or role in their lifetime. And finally, we should focus also on people of reproductive age, as their health and well-being will determine that of the next generation. The last 2.5 years have been filled with many twists and turns. It seems like before we can even put one crisis to bed, 4 more emerges. So life is like a hydra now of catastrophes. So with this rapidly changing world, the youth of today or the future old must be globally aware and globally competitive, yet ready to work together for a better world. They must be able to leverage on technology while remaining human. They must understand that everybody matters and have different needs. People who have experienced life without the internet and mobile devices, people who have experienced a different history and have different values, people who are much less fortunate than they, people who don't understand that they need to constantly adapt. Potential is more important than knowledge and competencies. And what are the key attributes of potential? I think they are the curiosity to seek out new experiences, knowledge, and self-improvement, the insight to make sense of new information to guide and refine your ideas, the ability to engage with people deeply so you can bring them along with you, the determination to be resilient in the face of challenges, and to persevere and finish what you start. Finally, as I leave you with quotations from our 2 eminent Nobel laureate speakers today on the power of youth, a need for all of us to know our place in the world and how it works, I would like to thank all the people who worked hard over the last 3 years to make this happen. You know who you are. Thank you. And now let me introduce Ms. Tsui Ming, the President-elect of the Asian Medical Students Association, to give her address. Thank you.
Good morning, and a very warm welcome to Dr. Vivian Balakrishnan, Minister for Foreign Affairs, Singapore, Guest of Honor, Ambassadors, Nobel Laureates, Dr. George Smoot, Dr. Kailash Satyarthi, and Dr. Serge Havroshi, Professor Chong Yap Sing, Dean of Yong Loo Lin School of Medicine, Dr. Lara Sprekman, CEO of Nobel Prize Outreach, distinguished guests, panelists, students, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Yi Ming, the President-elect of the Asian Medical Students Association Singapore, one of the organizers of the Nobel Prize Dialogue, and I'm honored to be able to stand here today to give some opening remarks to this exciting event. For the past 2 years, the world has struggled against COVID. This pandemic resulted in physical infirmity to a large majority of our population. But the seemingly invisible effects of this pandemic on other aspects of our well-being are insurmountable. Face-to-face interactions were discouraged, lockdowns were enforced, and uncertainty dampened our hopes and spirits for the future. Yet, such unprecedented times have also highlighted the importance of strong multi-sectoral partnerships in driving change and positive impact. As we gradually settle into a new normal, a new set of challenges await us. But regardless of the obstacles we may face, keeping the spark of conversation alive is the fundamental first step in recognizing and understanding the complexities of these global issues. Change starts from having candid conversations, and it is precisely this spirit of inquiry that we envision for the Nobel Prize Dialogue to embody in the series of discussions on global issues. This year, the Asian Medical Students Association Singapore, or in short, AMSA Singapore, is honored to be given the opportunity to partake in the co-organizing of the Nobel Prize Dialogue. At the heart of these discussions are the voices of the youth, the next generation of leaders taking over the reins in creating the future we hope to create. We hope that this event will not only give participants the opportunity to discuss their ideas and aspirations with thought leaders, but more importantly, to start a precedent where youths can have greater agency in driving our future through fresh perspectives. This is what AMSA Singapore strongly stands for. For many of us, the desire to learn more about the world and the drive to make a difference beyond our respective academic or work responsibilities comes from being in touch with the community and learning about the struggles of others. The world holds endless opportunities, and I hope that each and every one of us sitting here today can find our own inspiration to contribute to the voice of the youth on the national and international stage. With that, on behalf of AMSA Singapore, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to our colleagues from the Nobel Foundation who have consistently guided and supported us throughout the planning of this event. To Professor Tiki Pangetsu and Professor Chong Yap Sing for championing the importance of youth voice and giving us this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Lastly, this event would not have been possible without the hard work and dedication of my co-lead Charles and the most capable and reliable student team. I cannot be more thankful to have been able to walk this journey with all of you. On this note, I would also like to thank all our international guests for traveling all the way to Singapore to be a part of this Nobel Prize Dialogue. Welcome to Singapore. This is a bustling metropolitan with great cultural diversity, lots of lush greenery, and most importantly, very good food. I wish you all an amazing stay in Singapore. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Yiming. It's been an honor to have worked with you over these past years. Thank you. So, as you've heard, we're honored today by the presence of Dr. Vivian Balakrishnan, Singapore's Minister for Foreign Affairs, and I'm delighted now to ask him to join me on stage to give his address. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. My good friends, Fu Hua, Kei Guan, Yap Seng, Tiki is somewhere around too. And of course, Laura for making this happen. And George, Kailash, and I think later on this afternoon, we also have Serge. Thank you all for being here. And what is most pertinent is the fact that we have young people here. The purpose of this session really is to inspire the young people, to benefit from the brains, the achievements, the values of the Nobel Prize winners. And, you know, it's very humbling to stand here as the foreign minister and wonder what in the world I'm going to say that's going to be of any use. But if you're going to forget everything else that I'm going to say, I just want the young students to know it's a wonderful time to be alive. It's a time of great danger, but also a time of exhilarating opportunities. And it is a time in history when science, technology, politics, global affairs, and humanity are all telescoping into a focal point I suppose George would say this is almost like a black hole, and with grave and great opportunities. So let me make a ramble through some of these issues, and it's obviously not going to be a comprehensive lecture, but hopefully enough for you to start thinking and then to ask questions from the real Nobel Prize winners when they get on stage. First point, science has been a key driving force for human progress. It has shaped the past, and where we are today is a large result of the Industrial Revolution, and it will continue to shape the megatrends of the future. The development of the steam engine, railways, electricity, aviation, shipping, modern medicine, and now the digital revolution. These are just some of the examples in which science and technology have transformed our societies, have disrupted societies, families, politics, and diplomacy. Now, I will confess to being a techno-optimist, and that means I believe that the emergence and continuing progress of science and technology will bring more good than bad. But it is important to have your eyes wide open and to realize and to acknowledge that technology has always been a double-edged sword. Next point is that much of the progress that we have seen, especially in the last 200 years during the Industrial Revolution, has really been because science has been a global collaborative effort. And really what has happened in the last 2 centuries is that we've all been working off the same common stack of basic science, applied research, techniques and technologies, and shared it across the world. Access to ideas, the ability to disseminate those ideas, the creation of patents and intellectual property, a system in which there would still be sufficient fiscal and profit motives for inventors, and yet information, technology, and ideas would be disseminated worldwide. And the ability to all collaboratively on a global scale work on this single stack has been a key reason why science has advanced at such an accelerating pace in the last 2 centuries. Now, it is also equally important to understand it's not just about a global scale, but also getting a right balance between academia, private enterprise, and governments. Because if you think about it, translating basic science and applied research into novel products and services actually requires a functioning ecosystem of rules, finance, and ideas. Rules, finance, and ideas. If you don't get these 3 things right, you will not get the accelerating wheel of innovation moving. In the digital revolution, perhaps the area which has attracted a lot of attention is Silicon Valley. In Silicon Valley, we've seen a unique constellation of top universities collaborating with enterprises fueled by money and ambition, and also a facilitative set of social rules and government support. And the point I wanted to emphasize here is that we need to get the balance right between the profit motive on one hand, and that really animates the private sector. You do need to get the ethical rules right, because technology is always double-edged, and you want to make sure it is used for the welfare of humanity rather than just for the sake of generating more money, or worse, just to accumulate power. And in more recent decades, there's been a third dimension to this, which is the impact on the ecological balance of the planet. So understand that there is a triad, right? Profits, private profits, ethical rules, ecological impact. Now let's cast our minds through some recent examples of these factors in play, or when they are not in play, or worse, when they are unbalanced. The most recent, of course, is the COVID pandemic. From a purely scientific perspective, the unprecedented pace of the development of PCR tests, the publication of the genome of the virus, literally within weeks. The incredible pace at which vaccines were created and then made available to the world. This is a cause for celebration of the triumph of science. We also had the COVAX facility to help to organize and distribute vaccines across the world, and the word vaccine multilateralism that Prime Minister Lee coined, I think back in June 2020, has become mainstream. But actually, if you stop to think about it, even as you celebrate the achievements of science in dealing with this pandemic, the brutal fact is the pandemic also exposed major gaps in the world's collective pandemic prevention, preparedness, and our response. The truth is, with all the knowledge and with all the tools that we had at hand, we didn't do as well as we could have and as we should have. Even if you look within societies, and there are now papers which analyze the differential mortality rates resulting from COVID across different countries. And it turns out it's not just a matter of wealth of a nation or sophistication of our hospital care systems, but in fact, a crucial dimension has been the element of trust, of social capital. Whether citizens trust each other to do the right thing, whether we're able to collaborate to look out for each other, and relating to science, the credibility of scientific authority, and with that, political authority as well. The point is, it's not good enough to know the scientific facts or to have all the vaccines and techniques and tools available if you cannot persuade people to do the right thing. So this has been another key insight from COVID-19. And yet, the doctors in this room will tell you COVID-19 is not the first, it's not the last, and it's not even the most severe global pandemic that we will face. And given the state of the world now, and the way we've organized our economies and our societies, in fact, the risk of successive pandemics have gone up, not gone down. And so we will need to continue to emphasize research in public health and epidemiology, but really, we will also equally need to focus our minds on humanity, on how we relate to one another, how information is disseminated, is believed or not, and how we overcome the echo chambers and the cesspools of misinformation which are proliferating in modern society. This goes beyond what I'm sure we will continue to do very well, which is the development of new diagnostics, therapeutics, vaccines across the globe. I'm actually not so worried about the ability of scientists and healthcare professionals within our own domains, but it is the whole of society response which is lacking. Another example is climate change. It is, in fact, the most pressing. People used to say long-term, but in fact, it is now near-term challenge facing humanity. Just look at the newspapers in the last couple of months. Extreme weather events in different parts of the world. No region is spared. You see sweltering heat waves with record temperatures. You see more severe rainfalls, floods, and even colder winters. And again, in my own level, because I travel all over the world at a crazy pace, even in my journeys, I've experienced temperatures in the high 40s to the negatives. And the news and the requirement for us to cooperate and collaborate diplomatically to deal with these disasters has become more urgent. The drumbeat of alarm is real. And yet, we do have a responsibility to ensure a sustainable future for the young people. And the young people, I'm glad, have in fact embraced this cause with fervor because, in a sense, I suppose they realize that they have more at stake because they're going to be around here on this world longer than the older generation. We know that we're not going to reach our targets. I spent years also negotiating the Paris Agreement. We hoped we would be able to keep the temperature rise at 1.5 degrees. But in fact, today we're already 1.1 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels. And the World Meteorological Organization warns there is a 50% chance of temporarily breaching the threshold for at least one of the next 5 years. The trouble with statistics is that you think, well, 1 in 5 years, at least one of the next 5 years and 50%. The thing I always remind from a medical perspective, we can quote these statistics of patients, but when it happens to you, it's 100%. So we can't afford to take this lightly. Now, it is true that there will be new research breakthroughs and new technologies that will help us deal with climate change. And yes, there are available sources of renewable energy, clean energy, including solar, wind, geothermal, small modular nuclear reactors, green hydrogen, etc., which can reduce our reliance on fossil fuels and cut our greenhouse gas emissions. But really, whether or not we achieve it will depend on politics and economics. And we will require collaboration across the globe because human beings are always susceptible to the free rider temptation, which means if everyone else reduces and I don't have to make the sacrifices, I'll try to get away with it. This is not a time when we can afford free riding, either at an individual level or at an international level. Now let me change topics and give you another source for concern. Geostrategic rivalry. We watch the difficult and complicated relationship between the United States and China. Right now, there's a war in Europe, in Ukraine. And apart from all the risk of war and the human calamity that results, there is also an impact on science. And that is, if there is a real attempt at technological bifurcation and breaking apart innovation systems and supply chains, which, as I said earlier, the fact that we could work at global scale before is a key reason why we made so much progress. But if geostrategic rivalry really breaks this apart, there will be a big problem. Because it means, by definition, a world that is more divided, more volatile, more unstable, it means a world with higher inflation because supply chains will no longer work on the basis of efficiency. Just in time becomes replaced by just in case. And just in case is more expensive because you have to pay an insurance premium. And my worry is that in the scientific field, it will shut off avenues for cooperation. It will deepen divisions at a time when we need more cooperation, not less. And even for scientists, you will know that sometimes even your passport matters. And this is not healthy for science. This is not good for diplomacy or for world peace. So the point is, we have a problem with the global commons, whether it is about pandemics or whether it is about the management and application of science and technology or the global economy. And here, all we can do, because we are a tiny city-state, is to appeal to the better angels of leaders in countries which are bigger and whose decisions have a more profound impact on what will happen in the world. Now, although I've talked about geostrategic rivalry, it's also worth remembering that, in fact, if you can get the balance between competition and cooperation right, many good things can happen. I will refer to what the United States, I think, called the Sputnik Moment, when they suddenly realized that the Soviet Union had got to space first. And it focused the minds, brought all the elements of science and economics and government together. And yes, America reached the moon first. But what is also worth remembering is that right now, we have a 23-year-old International Space Station, about 400 kilometers above us in low Earth orbit. And it is a collaborative effort between Russia, United States, I think Japan, Canada, and Europe. And as recently as July, they made an announcement that the ability to launch astronauts. So, for instance, you will continue to have Americans on Soyuz launch craft, but interestingly, you will also have Russian cosmonauts launch on SpaceX rockets in the future in order to get to the International Space Station. Now, if we can maintain these patterns of cooperation in the midst of competition and without succumbing to geostrategic rivalry and war, then there is hope. One other area I want to draw attention to is artificial intelligence. We are on the cusp of a profound technological breakthrough because until recently, pattern recognition was an exclusive domain of human beings. Today, machines are able to use pattern recognition, and systems can hear, can see, can speak, and can organize. And we're only just beginning. But I also wanted to remind you that this is an extremely sharp, double-edged sword. And let me just give you two dimensions to think about. First, artificial intelligence and the decision-making that will be delegated to artificial systems basically means we will now have decision-making mechanisms which exceed the speed of human thought. What it means, just to put a political dimension to this, is that the time frame for top leaders to make in high-pressure situations, war or peace, life or death, that time is going to be compressed to a moment. And it's worth remembering that actually human thought, wisdom, and time to exercise judgment has not increased, although our machines have increased. So what that means is the probability of mishaps, miscalculations, and miscommunication in the future will greatly increase. And if you cast your mind back to the Cold War, when supposedly mutually assured destruction between nuclear powers was supposed to secure the peace, actually now when you read the declassified papers, you know we had a few close shaves. Can you imagine a future when nuclear buttons are actually outsourced to artificial intelligence? And even if you say there's going to be a human in the middle, but the decision time is reduced to an instant, I think it's a more dangerous future. There's another aspect to AI which bears thinking about, which is, without getting into the mathematics of how you train and enable deep learning by simulated neural nets. But the point is, a lot of conclusions or meta decisions of AI actually have a layer of incalculability, or perhaps I should say inexplainability in human terms. The machine will make the right call, but it may not be able to explain to humans why it made that decision. And once you start getting into black boxes where even the creator no longer understands how the decision was arrived at, you also take the risk of algorithmic failure, which can result in catastrophic situations and consequences, wittingly or unwittingly. So the point I'm making is that AI holds the potential to augment conventional nuclear and cyber war capabilities, and also makes strategic interactions between superpowers and even middle powers more unpredictable. And in fact, if you think that nuclear weapons were confined to a few states, AI and the ability for autonomous killing machines will not be confined to just a few states. So my point is that we actually need to integrate the power of artificial intelligence into a responsible pattern based on humanity and ethics and international relations in a constructive way. And if we fail to do this, we are entering very dangerous waters. My final example I want to think about is synthetic biology, genetic engineering. In the last, I would say, 2 decades, the simultaneous and mutually reinforcing revolutions in genetics, computing, nanomaterials, and robotics, just to cite 4 subdimensions, have opened up grand vistas for synthetic biology, genetic engineering, surgery, treatment. We have the potential to completely revolutionize the way we deliver healthcare. And yes, Yap Singh is right, we will live longer, and hopefully a higher quality of life. But there are in fact huge ethical and social quandaries which we need to navigate together. For instance, gene editing allows us to eliminate genetic diseases, sometimes even before a child is born. But where do you draw the line when it comes to germline editing? And right now we know of at least one scientist who is in jail for embarking on an experiment that was completely unethical. But when you get down to actually editing human genomes and germlines, in fact, we have reached a stage when you can edit human nature. Now, until recently, as I said, progress has been the result of science and technology. But what has not changed is generally the human genome, human nature. Once we edit human nature, all bets are off, because now we become part of that phenomena of great change too. So anyway, I don't want to go on, and I particularly do not want to scare the young people into a pessimistic view of the future. But come back to the theme of this dialogue, the future that we want together. And the key word is together. Global problems require global solutions. They cannot be solved by any one person or one country, no matter how smart or how wealthy you are. And despite all our differences in nationality, culture, political leanings, I believe there's far more that unites us as humans than divides us. And even if the politics takes time to be worked out, my message to you today is that all of us have agency. Commit to scientific development and progress in search of a better world and better outcomes for human beings. And I'm very glad that the Nobel laureates are here, and I've had the chance to have private conversations with them. And you will find that all Nobel laureates are not just about science or about domains, but they come with values and a very broad worldview. So platforms like the Nobel Prize Dialogue are more important. Laura, you've got to have more of these sessions all over the world. It is an opportunity to share ideas, learn from one another, discover our common humanity, look for global solutions to global problems, find new networks of collaboration, expand your minds, but do not lose your grounding in humanity, and understand that through collaboration, we can create a better future for the next generation to come. So to all the young people, I'll conclude with where I began. This is an exhilarating moment to be alive. A dangerous world, but a world replete with opportunities. Seize it, and for those of us in science and in STEM, and yet also with a sensitivity to humanity, I can think of no greater intellectual challenge and yet profound impact on the future. So thank you, and have a wonderful session ahead. Thank you very much.
Dr. Balakrishnan, thank you for such an inspirational start to our day, and for so beautifully outlining so many of the themes that we'll be discussing during the course of the day. Thank you. As you'll see from your program, we've asked two Nobel Prize laureates to talk on two very different aspects of the future we want together. And first, we're going to hear from 2014 Nobel Peace Prize laureate Kailash Satyarthi on marching to the future with our children. And after he gives his talk, he'll be joined on stage by Kishore Mahbubani, Distinguished Fellow at the Asia Research Institute at NUS, for a conversation. Please welcome him.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't think that I need these because I'm also fixed with this microphone. But let me follow some of the previous speakers, especially the Minister, Dr. Balakrishnan ji, standing here and speaking from the dais. So, dear young friends, Minister Balakrishnan ji, my fellow Nobel laureates, the officers and the team from the Nobel Gallery, sisters and brothers. What else could be a better place than Singapore to talk about the future of humankind? This is a proven land of possibilities. This is an inspiration for the entire generation. And this is also a dream city for many Asian countries. In fact, when I travel to some of the Asian countries, I learned from some politicians that they are selling the dream of Singapore to make their capitals or their big cities like Singapore. I don't know how many of them had succeeded so far, but you bring about dreams in the minds of millions and millions of people. And seeing the bright, smiling faces of the young people builds a confidence, a trust that the future of humankind is in strong, bright, and better hands. This is a very timely and important event to talk about dialogue. When we are passing through a difficult time, the time of conflicting interest, competing priorities, the time of compounded crisis, where the politics of silo and divide and different phobias is increasing globally. It is important that the Nobel laureates, lawmakers, academicians, and young people sit together. And this is exactly going to happen in next 2 days. Thousands of years ago, the sages of Vedas, the ancient book of wisdom in India, they have written a beautiful phrase, a mantra. And the mantra says very simple thing, which our previous speakers spoke, as well as the topic of today. Sangachadvam samvadadvam samvo manansi janatam deva bhagam yatha purve sanjananam upasate. This means let us resolve to walk together. We have to create a level playing field, a level walking field, so that no one is left out, no one is left behind. We have to talk in one tongue, the language of love, the language of wisdom, the language of compassion, so that the hatred and divide go away. And let us create a knowledge together, the knowledge which can bring about betterment for the entire humanity. So let us walk together, let us talk together, and let us create a knowledge together for all. This is the simple meaning of this mantra. Dear friends, as far as I understood, that whenever the humanity faces serious crisis, it emerges stronger, brighter, better. And we can have this hope that this is bound to happen. May not be in the nearest future, but definitely it will happen. When I'm talking about the children who are left out or left behind, let me share with you a success story. In 1998, we organized a worldwide march, a global march against child labor, especially the march against child slavery, trafficking, use of children for armed conflicts, etc. There was no international law before that on such issues until 1998-99. So when this idea came to my mind that let us demand for such a law, then the strategy was formulated that let us march across the globe with the children, the survivors, victims. They should take the lead and they should speak out for themselves. They should become their own liberators, their own advocates, their own change makers. This march went on for 6 months from 3 corners of the world. We covered 80,000 kilometers distance, double than the periphery of the earth, across 103 countries. 15 million people physically participated in the march during that long length. And when we reached Geneva in the Convention of International Labour Organization, the UN body deals with labor issues, many of those survivors who were sold again and again, who were trafficked from one to another country, who have been given tools and arms and guns in their tiny hands instead of education, books, toys, schools. And they shouted, "No more tools, no more guns in tiny hands. We want books, we want toys. We want copies, we want pencils." No government leader who was present there could say no to it. Many of them were in tears. And eventually, within a week, a resolution has been passed for such a law, and in a year time, in 1999, the ILO Convention on the Worst Forms of Child Labor has been unanimously adopted, and this becomes the only universally ratified convention in the history of ILO so far. That was the power of young people. That was the power of marching together so that the children are not left behind, left out. And that time, the number of child laborers in the world was 255 million approximately. In less than 20 years, it has come down to 150 million. From 250 million to 150 million. So the change was not only possible, but it was not beyond our reach. It was possible and it was attainable. And this togetherness has proven it. There are so many examples. But friends, today when I'm standing here, I remember a child in Ivory Coast, what we call Koteva in West Africa, who had wounds and scars and injuries on his legs and hands. He was working in a cocoa bean field that is very dangerous. And you know that cocoa is the core ingredient of chocolate. In a remote village, what they call Patty, in a small Patty, when I was sitting with a group of children, I asked this boy, "How do you like chocolate?" He looked here and there and asked to someone, "What is chocolate?" I tried to explain that this is tasty, this is delicious. We give in the gifts on various occasions. He did not understand. Neither other children of his age, 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old children. They have never tasted chocolate. They have never seen chocolate either. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry. But these children who are producing cocoa at the cost of their childhood, their education, their freedom, they did not see chocolate. I felt ashamed. My question to you, my dear friends, whose children are they? I was traveling in Pakistan and met young girls and boys who were stitching footballs. And sometimes when the needle goes inside their fingers, the blood comes out and they just suck and continue because they could be beaten up if they don't complete their job. Whose children are they? They cannot dream to play with those footballs. I was sitting with a group of children who were Syrian refugees in Germany, in a small town in Germany some years ago. There was a boy sitting on a wheelchair, maybe 12-year-old. I sat beside him. He said, I lost my parents in a bomb blast. I lost my family members when we were traveling to leave that place in a boat. Boat was sunken, but somehow I was saved. And I lost my legs in the same bomb blast. Two-thirds of Ukrainian children have faced serious consequences now and forever, the trauma forever, due to this Russian invasion on Ukraine. We have been reading in the newspapers that the children who were supposed to play in the open playgrounds, the children who were supposed to stay in schools safely, happily, and dream for their better life, they are pushed not only in hundreds, but in thousands and hundreds of thousands inside the underground tubes. I was reading lately that when some of the places, the schools are reopening, a child says that if I go to school, where would I go? My school was bombarded. Even if I go to a nearby building, who can take the guarantee that I will remain safe and my colleagues will remain safe? But even then, he says that I want to go to school. I wanted to study. Who is going to fulfill the dream of that boy and millions of those children who are facing conflicts, wars, and insurgencies? They are all our children. I repeat, they are all our children. If we don't consider them children and leave them out, leave them behind, we are not going to go to a happy, safe, just, sustainable, and peaceful future. 160 million children today are producing wealth at the cost of their childhood and their life, their future, as child laborers. Millions of children are being used for online child trafficking, online child sexual abuse. It is not about the poor countries. The online child sexual abuse is a global crime. They are all our children, as I said. We all understood, many of us as Nobel laureates. Me and some of my colleagues have created a group called Laureates and Leaders for Children, bringing about 92 Nobel laureates from all disciplines and the world leaders, former presidents, former prime ministers, and the present president, prime ministers, of course, kings, queens, etc. And we demanded that if we are not going to prioritize the issues of vulnerable, marginalized children in low-income and least developing countries, then we are bound to go off track. We were already slow on our tracks in attaining Millennium Development Goals in the past and Sustainable Development Goals in the present. We are failing in most of the goals. I'm saying this even being one of those 17 UN SDG advocates appointed by the Secretary General, that we don't act in unison. If we don't act with a sense of urgency, we are going to fail in most of the goals, especially the goals related to our children. We were hoping that the world will learn a simple thing, that world is not only interconnected only, but this is also interdependent. As Dr. Balakrishnan says, that global problems cannot be solved without tackling as a global family, as a global solution. But what has happened? I will give you one or two examples. People like us wrote letters to almost every president and prime minister, or every head of the state, the 92 Nobel laureates and leaders together, that prioritize marginalized children. G7 countries have launched this global action project or something for the recovery from pandemic. And earmarked $12 trillion 2 years ago. But out of these $12 trillion, only 0.3, I repeat, 0.13 were earmarked for the low-income countries. Not even 0.5%, not even 1%. 0.13% of these $12 trillion. There's another example, which was quite I would say, inspirational. And many poor countries, low-income countries, felt that they are going to get benefit out of it. And that was a historical, what they call the IMF special drawing rights. And $650 billion have been earmarked for that. $650 billion for a couple of years. But what was the end result? The European countries got major share of it, and on an average, $2,000 have gone to per child in Europe, and $60 per child to Africa, in Africa. Such a huge difference. Even something which has been launched for the recovery of, economic recovery of the pandemic, where the children can get the benefit of it, this was the difference. So we did not learn. And that's why, dear friends, we have to rethink. We have to act. Someone like me who have a simple understanding about the world, that until and unless the last child of the society, this yardstick is driven by Mahatma Gandhi's talisman to measure the development. I say that if the benefits of any of your policies, any of your budgetary allocations and pledges and promises do not reach to a child who is born in a low-income country, least developed country, born in a family which is marginalized, which is poor, living below poverty line, working at a brick kilns or a stone quarry or in a difficult situation, if the girl of that family is not healthy and happy and educated, then for me, these big development policies are worthless or meaningless. And that is the reason we are all facing serious consequences of this kind of tendencies. And that is the reason we are assembled here to think of a common future for humankind where everybody can walk together. While summing up, we have been suggesting 3 ideas or 3 measures. One is policy related, one is principle related, and one is behavioral. We demand that children must be given their fair share. In many countries, I'm not talking about the countries like Singapore, but in many countries, or most countries I would say, less than 2% of GDP is spent on education for children. In most countries, where the population of young people is 3%, 4%, no, 30%, 40%, the GDP expenditure per capita is less than 3 or 4% for 30 or 40% of population. In education, healthcare, and protection combined. So we have to ensure fair share in policies, fair share in budgetary allocations, and fair share in social protection programs. This is a policy issue, or principal issue, I would say, combined with policy. The second one is that we have to think of a global social protection mechanism. We brought this thought before the European Union, European Commission. I had a series of meetings in White House with the top leadership and also with a number of head of the nation for this idea. What I'm talking about. In a number of places we have seen in last 60, 70 years, particularly in Europe, that the social protection measures have helped in ensuring education not for children but for the lifelong learning for other people. It has reduced poverty. It has helped in creating more jobs. It has helped in ensuring health. And in case of children, we have seen in Brazil, the Bolsa Escola and Bolsa Familia. We have also witnessed in India this midday meal in schools. We have seen in a poor country like Bangladesh, or the country like Nigeria, where school feeding programs and others have helped in bringing children in schools and retaining them. So social protection measures have helped, but they are so scattered and so tiny. There is a need of global social protection mechanism. And that is the discussion we are bringing in the United Nations General Assembly in coming weeks. And we are gathering support. And the third and last thing, which is most important. Dear sisters and brothers, dear young friends, we have globalized everything. We have globalized economies, markets, productions, information, technology. We have also globalized the problems, including global warming, terrorism, conflicts, divisions, and so on. This is the right time to globalize compassion. Let us globalize compassion. I'm not talking about just being sympathetic to each other. I'm not talking about just be empathetic, but be compassionate and globalize it. And compassion is not a preaching. It's not merely a value. It is a feeling of every individual to connect with each other, every nation to connect with each other, businesses, governance, Even the faith institutions should be compassionate. That means feeling the suffering of others as your own suffering, with a strong drive to elevate that suffering, to end that suffering. That is compassion. This is the time to feel like that. Dear friends, let us globalize compassion. Let us globalize compassion. Some of my Nobel Committee friends be remembering that when I was invited to deliver my acceptance speech in Norway, I lost my papers, speaking notes. And suddenly a story came to my mind, and which I narrated there. I read in childhood. There was a heavy fire broken out in jungle. All animals and birds were rushing for a safer place, including King Lion. And Lion noticed there was a tiny hummingbird flying towards the fire, flames. And he shouted, "What are you doing?" She replied, "Sir, I was born and grew up here. I'm not going to leave, I am going to extinguish this fire." "How come?" more surprisingly he asked. She said, "Sir, look at my beak. I am carrying a drop of water. I am carrying a drop of water. I am doing my bit. I am doing my bit," she said. Dear friends, I am not a scientist. I am not a professor. I am not a priest. But I know that there is a tiny hummingbird inside each one of you. Each one of you. Sometimes it awakens. Sometimes it calls you. Do something for the betterment of humanity. Go beyond your own selves and own shields. Do your bit for humanity. You are better than a tiny hummingbird, but inside you is a tiny hummingbird. I am here to awaken it. I am here to awaken that bird. When you go back from here, I hope that you will keep in your mind, in your heart, that many of the world's children need you. Speak. No voice can be louder and compelling and honest than the voice of young people. You are better equipped with knowledge and technology in your hands. Speak out. Be the voice of voiceless children. Be the face of those invisible lot. They need you. Would you do something? Yes or no? Can you write something when you see that there is an atrocity against a child? A child is sold, child is abused, child is exploited. Can you write something on your mobile phones and send it and make a complaint? Or at least support those who are fighting to end this menace? Can you do it? Young people. The elder people, wise people are a little bit shy always, because they always think, should I say or should I not say? Should I raise my hand or not? But for young people, as I said, that your voices are most compelling and strongest. Can you do it? No, I can't hear. I can't hear really. Yes or no? Yes. Can you think of those children? Can you talk of those children and for those children? Yes. Can you use your mobile phones and your smartphones in your voice for those children? Yes. So let us march together from the darkness to light, from slavery to freedom, from ignorance to knowledge and wisdom. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was, I'm sure you'll all agree, truly inspiring. And I must say, it's a tremendous achievement for the NUS School of Medicine and for NUS to bring these Nobel laureates to Singapore to inspire the young people of Singapore. And since your goal is to inspire the young people, I'm going to begin with a very, very typical personal Singapore question. When these young people go home, they have to meet their mothers. And when they meet their mothers, they say, today I met a Nobel Prize winner who had a lucrative career as an engineer, and you gave up your lucrative career to start a global childhood movement. I'm sure your parents must have said, what are you doing this? Why are you giving up your lucrative career? And that's a very typical Singapore concern. How do you address the mothers of Singapore and tell them, give up your lucrative careers and save the world?
Well, the mothers always aspire for a lucrative careers to their children, but they are much more compassionate than the fathers. And if you make them understand that I started thinking, because they all said that they started thinking, they will do something. They will start talking. And if they say that the clothes I'm wearing, the shoes I'm using, the soccer balls, the footballs I'm playing with, the computers I'm using, or the cars I'm sitting, many of those products are made out of children who are in slavery, who are trafficked, who do not have opportunity to go to school like we do. Should we do something for them? She will say, yes, if you can do. Don't give up your career, but you keep on doing. So my mother also told me that finish your engineering. But let me share with you and all that I belong to a quite modest family. My father was a police constable who passed away when I was young. So my widow mother has to make a lot of sacrifice for my higher studies. After my graduation, I wanted to continue. So I was trained as a transformer design and high voltage transmission engineer. I taught in the university for about a year or 1.5 years. But right from my childhood, I was quite passionate about the issues of such children who were working on the streets, were not sitting with me in the classrooms and so on. Many of them were abused and exploited. So that was so close to my heart. And I always believe that heart is much more powerful than the mind. The combination of both of them works, but I always try to follow my heart, considering that my mind will follow me. So I studied science and technology, but I decided to, it was not my career, it was my inner call. I have a simple dream that every child should be free to be a child. Every child should be free to laugh and cry and to see the sunlight, daylight. Every child can dream and chase the dream and touch the sky. So I was very clear, and I'm very clear, that I will see the end of child slavery in my lifetime. I am not going to leave this world, but this is possible only together with you. No one can do it alone, as you said.
And when you started this, who were the people who inspired you? I mean, you mentioned Mahatma Gandhi a few times. Were there some other leaders who inspired you, who made you believe that you could sort of really transform the world?
Well, definitely I'm inspired by Mahatma Gandhi, but his next generation, who was also inspired by him, was Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, people like that, the Dalai Lama. Dalai Lama is luckily still alive and a good friend of mine, like fatherly figure. So we are friends and son and father-like relations. So, so many inspirations. But I was also inspired by some of the great books that includes Bible and Holy Quran, Gita, Vedas. And I could keep on fighting. Many times I have been attacked badly. I have my broken foot. I have my broken shoulder. I cannot raise my right hand, because I was attacked by those mafia who were using children in slavery. And I narrowly escaped from death many times when they took out the gun and tried to shoot me, and it happened. So I have injuries, and my backbone is broken. But Gita, the holy book of India, always say that we are not born and we will not die. This is the body which is born and which will die, but my soul will never vanish. Everybody is a son or daughter of divinity. So each one of us have a divine soul inside us, so no one can kill us. Mm-hmm. So if we keep on fighting for good cause, we will never die.
Well, that's tremendous courage on your part. When you're talking of a good cause, you mentioned earlier that you had actually went to Pakistan to see the children sewing the footballs. When you look at the questions of peace and war, one of the areas where I think more can be done to make this region peaceful is the relations between India and Pakistan. Do you see any hope of a more peaceful relationship between these two countries?
Absolutely, absolutely. I have some of my best friends, like my family, in Pakistan for many, many years. Of course, when I went to Pakistan for the first time, many years ago, almost 35 years ago or 40 years ago, and when I saw some children were working at brick kilns and also in carpet factories, I started fighting for them. And there was no fight against child labor in that country. So Pakistani government alleged or blamed that Kailash Satyarthi is a raw agent, the Indian spy agent. And but I was fighting for my Pakistani...
Raw for everybody, that's the Indian Intelligence Agency.
Yeah, Indian...
They may not know what raw means.
Yeah, raw means Indian Intelligence Agency. But on the other hand, many of the Indians blamed that why he is traveling to Pakistan and fighting for the children of Pakistan, so he could be the Pakistani Intelligence Agency's spy living in India and trying to kill the industries. I did not want to kill the industry. I want to end this menace of child slavery, which was making the industries dirty and polluted in terms of morality and ethics, but also in terms of international laws and treaties. So, like the carpet weaving, that was common in Pakistan, Nepal, and India, all these three countries. So I was fighting for all these children. And so people started blaming me like that. But I said that is very rare that somebody is an Indian agent, Indian a spy agency agent, and Indian
and a
Pakistani agent. But I said that I am always an agent for my children, and my children do not see any borders. In fact, I'm of very strong opinion. I never believe in any border. I never believed in any boundary. I never believe in any war. I never believe in any wall. We have been creating walls among son and father, husband and wife, brothers and brothers, sisters and sisters, right from our home to the whole world. We have created so many walls. But this is the time to break those walls and use that material to build the bridges in our personal life, in our social life, in our political life. Let us learn from birds. They can fly from one to another border. They don't see. They have no idea of borders. Let us learn from the animals. They can just walk in search of some grass or some other things to eat from one border to another border between India and Pakistan. or the birds from Indian mosque or Indian temple can fly and sit on the across the border in Pakistani temple or mosque. So one day, I'm sure we will learn from birds and animals to break those boundaries and walls.
Right.
And India and Pakistan will definitely live as brothers.
But as you know, right now we live in a world with walls. And you mentioned in your remarks one remarkable statistic that when the allocation was made for children, a European child got $2,000 and an African child got $60. Now that is an indication of divisions and walls where children in one side get far more privileges than children on the other side. From your point of view, how do we bridge that divide? How do we ensure a more equitable treatment of children in Africa, Europe, and Asia, and everywhere?
Well, I have, as I said before, we are working on this idea of creation of a global social protection mechanism, which will have a strong component for marginalized children, especially in the low-income countries. So, and this idea is gaining momentum, as I said. That requires only $53 billion annually, this global social protection mechanism that can protect every single child and every single new mother in all low-income countries, $53 billion. So that is the statistics coming. How much is that money? This is less than 10 days of global military expenditure.
10 days.
10 days, less than 10 days. I'm not saying that we can be so idealistic that tomorrow the walls will fall and the wars will go away. That is not going to happen tomorrow. But day after tomorrow or day after tomorrow, there should be some voices, strong voices, moral voices, keep on working and demanding the peace in every sphere of life. So, children are not responsible for any war. Children are not responsible for any insurgency, conflict, violence, even the poverty and adult unemployment. They are not responsible. But they are the worst victims of all those wars. There is a report that in Ukraine, for example, and a couple of other places, Tigray or some parts of Afghanistan and so on. In these conflict zones or war zones, one child is pushed into chronic malnutrition, not just malnutrition, chronic malnutrition every 15 minutes. Is it the legacy which we are leaving behind us to our children? It is not possible. I repeat that truth always prevails. The peace always prevails. Hope always prevails. We should not leave those things. We should keep it closer to our heart and our hands. Truth, hope, and peace. We should have trust in it. And that's why we have to learn to walk together. That is possible.
I agree with you, but at the same time, in the real world, as you know, wars still begin, and we have challenges. And I had the pleasure and honor of being a good friend of Kofi Annan, who also, as you know, like you, won the Nobel Peace Prize. And I saw at first hand, when he opposed the war in Iraq, the then United States government, led by Dick Cheney, launched a vicious campaign against him. Vicious. Because he stood up and said this war is illegal. And I'm sure you've experienced something similar to him, that when you argue for the right thing, you do get attacked. And, a lot of public pressure. How do you stand up to that pressure? How do you deal with having to confront people who still want to continue fighting these wars and who still want to continue with these causes?
Well, if somebody believes in certain values and principles and practice them with the utmost conviction, determination, and enjoy living in that, then I don't think that anything is impossible. there's no reason to give up the hope, because hope is always like a battery, and we should keep it charged time to time so that it can show us path, it can show us the goal, and it can enlighten us from inside. So we can enlighten the outside world and inside by keeping our hope alive. So hope is the key. So despair never wins. Despair come and go. But the hope is something which is not only inevitable, but it will prevail in the end of the day. So we should not leave the hope. We are sitting here because right from our childhood, our parents have hope in us. We are sitting here because they have been able to provide us a few things like freedom, like education and well-being, and we are enjoying it. So if something could happen in a small place like Singapore, why can't it happen in the neighboring countries and neighboring world? So that is very much possible. We can. So that's why I started with this saying that this is the land of hope. This is the land of possibility, and this is the right place to have such kind of discussions.
Well, I think that's a very good note on which to end our discussion. You're right. We are very blessed to live in Singapore, where we enjoy this remarkable peace and must say remarkable prosperity. But as you pointed out, there are not many in the world that have enjoyed this. And it's actually very inspiring that you ask all these young people to become hummingbirds, to fly with a drop of water in their mouth and try to extinguish all the great fires in the world. So thank you very much for inspiring us.
Pleasure.
And thank you for coming. Thank you very much.
With such inspirational people to listen to and such important things to discuss, who would have the job of being timekeeper? We do have to think about time, though, because we are overrunning, and so I'm going to ask our next pair to keep it as short as they can. But I just want to hear what he says. I know. Kailash talked of children looking up into the sky, and maybe some of those children are looking up into space, which is where George Smoot, 2006 Nobel Prize laureate in physics, is going to take us next in his talk. And after he talks, he'll be joined on stage by Karin Nielsdotter, who is the CEO of Spaceport Sweden, for a discussion. So George, the stage is yours. And I've tried to stop George speaking before in my time, and it's not easy, so I might need your help at some point.
Thank you. I knew I needed some control. So thank you very much for inviting me here. Adam twisted my arm. And when we first started, I had given a talk at Chalmers on the future of space travel, which was a lot of stuff packed into an hour. But then this was delayed, and the time was deallocated. And since the talk was about our future, it became our future in space. But first I want to say thank you very much for inviting me here. And I want to specifically welcome or thank the young people in the audience whose future has already begun, even though some of you are in college still preparing for that future. 3 of them I met and gave a difficult physics problem to this morning. So we'll see how they do on that. But we've been struggling in it for a long time. And the point that I have here is anybody who's young, even still a child, has already started our future. They're already partway in it. They are already in a structure. They're already learning certain skills and tools. They're already going what's going on. So one of my points is that when we're talking about what future we want, we're talking about a system that's ongoing that we're going to have to encourage and divert and push towards the direction that will give us the future we want. That we just can't change things arbitrarily. We already have built-in biases and structures. And so we have to be changing the ecosystem and moving things. Space is a place where it's going to be new and where this is going to happen. And so in my very reduced time that, Adam is trying to push down even more, I'm going to talk about what our direction of the future in space is going to be, and maybe a little bit of what we can do about it. But one of the things that's obvious is we're going to have an internet of spacecraft or satellites, and they're going to serve multiple purposes. They're going to be for planetary defense and for our future prosperity and well-being. Okay, so I'm going to first show you, well, if my controller works, first show a little movie from a few years ago that I picked because it makes some of my major points. Our future is in space in a lot of ways. Most of the future is still on the Earth, but it's not really just about dreams. You've got to envision the future. And so it's about expanding our limits. How are we going to go, right? And build the most incredible civilization we can imagine. Like going to Mars, right? Maybe having a system there. Going to the outer planets and exploring them. These are things that are inspiring, but these are things that take an infrastructure and a whole other set of things to make happen. We're going to have space colonies, that's really spectacular. If we're going to have cities on other worlds, we're really going to have to do some special planning and so forth. And, you have a vision and an inspiration, but then you have to think about how you're going to make it work. So let's look back a little history. It's the new transportation systems that allowed us to build a new level of civilization. And ships made Singapore what it is today. If you look back, with no ships, there'd be no Singapore. And, for the United States, and all of Americas, it was ships, the more advanced ships that made it possible. And then we later got aviation and then rockets. Now here's a picture of, it's sort of automatically going, of the Earth, and we're talking about what satellites are around it. But let's look at how it's going to work, because it's going to be commercially driven. Right now, we get 80 to 100 space missions a year. But in the future, we're going to get 1,000. That's 3 things going to space a day. Okay? And it's going to be for a lot of activities to support things on the Earth, for commercial stuff, space tourism, which is a lot of the start of everything going on. And the economic value of these things is going to be in the trillions of dollars. That's really quite amazing. And, the issue is going to be, how do we develop the space transportation systems, and how do we then develop the infrastructure in space in order to make it work? And right now, everything that goes to low Earth orbit goes by rocket. And rockets have a basic inefficiency in them, right? And so this was actually, I believe, a film that was made for a company that was trying to propose a separate boosting system to put rockets in orbit to make it cheaper. And so, but it's a beautiful movie, and there's a nice, you don't get to hear this inspiring music, but it's, it's inspiring, but it's a true vision of how we're going to get there, how we're going to make space work, how is that going to be an important part of your future, how is that going to be one of the major industries. And the real issue is this. Space transportation systems like ships are incredibly efficient for bringing goods and services, goods to other places. Trucks are pretty good, but rockets are only at about the 1% level. And it's because of the fact you have to have this high velocity to get to low Earth orbit. All right, so that's a driver. So here's some data on what goes on. Here is the cost of putting a kilogram in orbit versus time, and $20, last year's dollars. And you can see there is a suggestive line drawn through here, power law, on what's going on, which is very consistent with the learning curve in manufacturing in commercial activities. You build more of a certain product, it gets cheaper. That's one of the things we've learned, starting with automobiles, starting with all kinds of things. They all, semiconductors, solar cells, all of these follow the similar kind of learning curve. So it's not surprising, except when you look at what NASA says was their goal, and you look at what SpaceX says they're going to be able to do with the rocket that's going to make it physically possible, physically with a P or an F, depending on your viewpoint, to go to Mars and build a colony, right? So there's some advances going on. And here's the development of things that take payloads to low Earth orbit. And you can see rockets have gotten bigger over time, although if you look, you will see we only now starting to have rockets that are better than the Saturn V's that took humans to the moon. And so there's an issue. Why did we have the fallback? What goes on? There were mistakes made, but there was also the fact there wasn't a good plan to do after you went to the moon. What was the next step in the development of space? And we'll come back to that when I talk about Artemis, which is due to be launched soon. Okay, so here's sort of a snapshot of satellites around the Earth. Okay, we're already in the satellite business. We can't really function properly on Earth if we don't have a bunch of satellites. But there is a new generation of stuff that started that wasn't on that list of stuff. There was one on that list that's gone away, which was mirrors to send sunlight to solar panels on the Earth. That one's dropped off. But the internet satellites. So here's a plot of the near-Earth national satellites that is run by countries. That was September 1st. And here's the plot of the Starlink satellites as of September 1st. See, all those little dots in that picture are Starlink satellites. Okay, some of you may have noticed that last Tuesday, Apple announced that the Apple Watch and the Apple phones will be able to link directly to those satellites. You can get coverage anywhere in the world. Just subscribe to Starlink and you're all set. Okay, so the thing about the Starlinks is there are roughly 1,500 up now because they send up 50 at a time, and so keeping track is, I got to check more often. But they're planning to set up 12,000. Okay, 12,000 is 10 times what any country or any sum of countries has set up. Okay, here's a snapshot of the Web 1 satellites that are up. They're only planning on putting up 350, 400 satellites, but they've already got subscribers and customers. Okay, and here's just a picture. There's a time lapse taken in the southern United States, and you can see as the Earth is rotating, the stars make a streak that go diagonally, but you see a set of vertical stripes. Those are the Starlink satellites just after a launch, and they streak across the field of view. And so it's really ongoing. Last year was a transition where space tourism became real. This year is a transition where commercial stuff is starting to dominate space. Okay, and just to emphasize that, there are 7 big space companies in the race to build global satellite internet networks. That's the list of them. SpaceX is number 1, and they're up and they're operating. There are 3 or 4 more companies that I know about that are proposing to do it, and there's one of them from my house in California. I can see the company and the factory where they're building it. They have a different strategy, but they're putting up small satellites cheap, but they're going to be able to launch one a day, like that. And so it's a really serious business, and it's like the early days of cars or early days of computers. There's going to be some shakeout, but there's going to be a few, the big 4 or the big something that's going to survive, right? Okay, so let me change topics because this is the second part of the infrastructure that we're talking about. So here's a plot versus discovery date of the known near-Earth asteroids. So in Chinese, if I could remember how to say it, it's crisis and opportunity. These asteroids represent great danger to the Earth and great opportunity to the Earth. So let me talk about the danger, because this is scary. But this is a place where global governments is obviously needed, but right now it's being done by a national country because people various countries won't share their technologies, right? Okay, so. All right, so here's what space looked like as of the known objects up to 2018. You'll notice there's a lot of stuff around the Earth. You go out a little further, eventually you go out toward the asteroid belt, and there's a lot of them, but we're not tracking all of those because these guys are getting paid to find all the near-Earth objects so they can protect the planet against them when we develop the tools to do that. So imagine you lived in a city on the equator and an asteroid is coming down and it's going to get you, either land right on your city or right offshore and push a tidal wave into you. Would you like to have defense against that? Well, the answer is yes, but it's not quite there. So there is going to be, on the 26th, a smashing of an asteroid, but it's really a smashing of a spacecraft, okay? And I draw your attention to the little emblem up in the left-hand corner, which is this, I can't read it here, but it's the Planetary Defense Authority, right? And you'll see, but there's a nice set of, a pair of asteroids, one orbiting around the other, each orbiting around each other, that are near to the Earth. And though they're not going to hit the Earth, they're going to run a test on the 26th, where they take this DART spacecraft, double asteroid, reorbiting, I forget what DART stands for exactly, double asteroid. They're going to smack it in, right? This started some months ago, but absolutely this is going to happen on the 26th. There it tells you what the DART is. It's going to happen. They're going to hit the little one and change its orbit so it'll be in a more circular orbit around there, just to prove they can hit it and change its orbit. Now, if you study basic physics, first year physics, you know billiard balls run each other. That's not, they're not testing the law of conservation of momentum, they're testing the law of can we hit it? Can we hit it in the right spot, okay? So the thing you should notice is in here, and besides the people doing, they're deliberately going to asteroid. They know something about the shape of this asteroid, they know a lot more about the asteroid than you would see, and you would think about. And so this rocket was launched. It takes months to get the stuff into position. It just recently, 3 days ago, got pictures of what the thing they were going to hit. From it was all flying blind. So this is an incredibly precise hit, unless you can make mid-course corrections, right? So it's kind of stuff. And there's the rocket going up. It's impressive, right? But in some of the newspaper articles, you read how they're going to divert an asteroid so it won't hit the Earth. Well, this is learning the technology of how to divert an asteroid so it won't hit the Earth. Because in principle, what you got to do. It's just you better have that thing that you're going to smack into it going. And if you're a basic physicist, it's mass times velocity. That's got to be very high. You want to crash and go in opposite directions so that you can have the maximum effect. And so here it is, the solar cell unrolling. It's an interesting mission, but $330 million is not a trivial amount of money, but on the other hand, you still got to learn if you can hit these guys, right? And do what you want to do, right? All right, since I'm running out of time, I'm trying to skip to the end. Let's go to the opportunity part. So here's a little poster that I pulled up, although this is actually quite simple. The space economy is going to be a modern-day gold rush. This is mining asteroids will create a number of trillion-dollar companies. So, they give this example of this one particular asteroid in which you can get platinum, right? Platinum, iridium. Turns out you can get a lot, if you pick the right asteroids that came from the center of the planet, you can get a lot of very heavy, interesting metals that are used in modern technology and whose price is extremely high, right? So it's quite a straightforward thing to think about doing. And if you have the money, which is billions of dollars, just like with the SpaceX, it costs $10 billion before they get all the satellites up, or some of the lesser ones, it's $5 billion or $1 billion. But it's in the billion-dollar range. You can go out and think about mining asteroids and bringing the stuff back to Earth slowly, right? The other thing you can do is go and get cometary debris, and it has water on it. Water is the most valuable thing you can find when you're in space. If you're setting up a manufacturing facility or a colony or whatever in a space station or on the moon, water is the thing you want because you can make oxygen out of it, good to breathe, you can grow plants, you can drink water. There's a lot of good things you can do with water. Okay, so here's the bad news. If you're going to do it at low cost, you're going to use the Holman trajectory. And if you had followed the time, we started in 2015, and it's going to take us 6 years to go from the asteroid to the Earth, or the Earth to the asteroid. So if you're going to set up an asteroid mining, you're going to have to think of a bad process where you're sending the stuff back as cheap as possible or to near Earth orbit, and then you're going to be running a stream of those, doing that kind of stuff. And stuff that I wrote up about this some time ago, you want to use solar power, you want to do the mining by automated systems, and then you want to do the refining using solar power refineries at the asteroid and just bring back the really valuable stuff that you want to sell on the Earth or you want to take to the moon or to the space station. Okay, whoops, I went too far. Or he's trying to hurry me up. Okay, so asteroid mining, this is sort of my idea. You got to have automated systems, you got big solar cells, you got solar furnaces to do the kind of stuff. It's actually cleaner for making the metals than doing it on the Earth with smelter processes and so forth. So you may re-refine some of it on the Earth, but in fact, you can bring it in very refined. All right, I got to keep moving forward. Okay, so the Artemis mission now is scheduled for launch on the 23rd. If you will notice, the main thing is complicated orbits to get from the Earth to the moon and back. It takes you typically on the scale of 10 days to go to the moon, 10 days to get back. You know, when you're thinking about interplanetary interstellar travel, it's not trivial. It takes 6 months minimum, usually 9 months or more to go to Mars. Interplanetary commerce is going to be complicated. Interstellar commerce isn't going to be. So this is what the kind of thing is that we're going to have to do. So, you know, if you think about a lunar base, I don't think it looks like the drawing on the left. I think you go look for natural caves and tunnels. You've got a good overshield against micrometeorites and cosmic rays that are coming down like crazy all the time. And you put up doors for, you know, and you have a protective system where you can put that. And you try and locate it near water. And several sets of people know there is water near the poles because that's one place that can survive when a cometary object hits. It's got dirty water in it. That water is then frozen and kept there and you can breathe. And if you got water, it makes your life on the moon a lot easier. It gives you fuel, gives you oxygen, and it gives you stuff to grow plants with. With solar power and water and a little fertilizer, you can do pretty well. Okay, going to Mars, way more complicated. This is the concept. I won't go through in detail because now I have 25 seconds left. I'm not going to quite make it, but I'm going to make it not too terribly. If you're going to go to Mars, you're going to have a lot of trips from the Earth to low Earth orbit. You're going to repackage and reassemble what you're going to do. It's like transshipment in Dubai or something. And then you're going to send these things 9 months minimum, typical thing. 6 months if you're willing to burn fuel and you have the right alignment. But remember, Mars and Earth don't line up right very often. That's why if you look at missions to Mars, you'll see them happening only periodically. And then you're going to go there, and then you're going to need to refuel on Mars so you can go back, right? So it's complicated to build a Mars base, but it's a dream. And Elon Musk was able to hire a lot of really good engineers because they wanted to be on that deal for something that's historically important, right? All right. Okay, so will there be a Mars city? Maybe. You know, what would it look like? Probably not quite like this. It probably won't have those rockets in the background. I think they're cut and pasted in there, but it's, you know, it's part of our future. It's conceivable that we will have a Mars city, although I don't know if we'll make it within 20 years. Elon Musk wants to go and die on Mars, if he, not by crashing, but just being there. And I think it's going to be tough, but it's good to have a vision. Okay, and after that, you're going to terraform Mars. If they can find this, that's important. Keep discovering there's water on Mars. Keep discovering that there's water that's maybe accessible. You can then think about changing Mars into a place where you can grow plants. You can have an atmosphere, and so forth. It would never be as neat as Earth, but it'd be cool to do that, right? So usually we say conclusions. And here I'm saying the beginning. It's really the beginnings because we're already started. A new space has already begun. The reason we're going back to the moon again was that China, just like the Soviet Union, pushed the United States into a race to the moon, then it abandoned it because it wasn't the structure. China now says they're going to go to the moon, so the United States and its partners are going to go to the moon slightly first, maybe, but there are other reasons to go to the moon too, and to build satellite stations around the moon, not in low moon orbit and high moon orbit. Those are good places to be doing manufacturing and doing other stuff. So there is a change coming. That change is a good future for all of us, but it's going to have, humans going into space is going to bring human problems with it to space, right? It's not the same. It's not like space is going to be like Star Trek, where you just no money and there's no whatever. There's going to be, a lot of other stuff. And so today we're started the transition into commercialization of space, which is not got a good set of laws with it because different countries and different organizations have different sets of laws. You don't have all the ecosystem and laws set up to commercialize space. It's going to happen anyway, but you'd like to do it in some kind of reasonable rubric, not some crazy rubric. And so, we'll see what happens, but space is in our future. It's up to us to drive that future in the direction that makes it work really well for everybody. And there's going to be a problem. The people who develop the way to go to space, they're going to drive the future of the human race on a really big scale. And so we need to think carefully about how we do this, but we need to do it. So thank you.
Thank you so much, George, for that very, very inspiring, but also
well, I hope
view.
It was inspiring, but you shouldn't, when you feel inspired, you can dream of what it is you think you're going to have in the future, but you still got to realize you realistically have to achieve it. I mean, I've been sending stuff into space, and I got to say, there's a lot of roadblocks in the way.
Let's get to those.
Okay.
Have a seat, George. No, you've given us a very inspiring view into the future, but also some of the practical challenges.
It's all about practical in the end.
It is,
right?
yeah. But as you mentioned, we moved from an agricultural economy to an industrial economy, and now we're in a space economy. And the turnover is about $450 billion US, and it's forecasted to be $1 trillion industry. But as we move the economic sphere into space, and as we try to establish now a human presence, an interplanetary presence, we hope, mining asteroids and building a village on the moon, and hopefully colonize Mars. What learnings can we bring from the blue planet as we move on to the red planet? So I thought we'll focus on that today. And as you can see, I've been told to dress for the job that I want, so hence the flight spacesuit here. But I also have a 6-year-old girl at home, and she wants to become a doctor. But not only a doctor, she wants to become a moon doctor, because she realizes if there's going to be a village on the moon, it's going to need a doctor, right? So looking into the future and looking into setting up a base on the moon, how is that going to be governed, for example, and on the notion of healthcare? How would practical things like that work? Would you?
Okay. This is easy. At the beginning, you only choose to send people to the moon that are pretty healthy to start with, just like when you go to the South Pole. they do that. They maybe take my wisdom teeth out just because they didn't want to have to do dentistry at the South Pole, and it's an altitude. You're going to be careful to choose who you send, but you're going to need medical specialists. You may not send the dentist first, but you will definitely send the doctor, because there are going to be diseases. But one of the things you do is you do what you think about doing during a pandemic. You very carefully screen people and clean people and run them through filters, you know, and the hand cleaning and the whatever. You do all that kind of stuff before you bring. So when there's a small number of people at the moon, disease is not quite a severe problem, but you still have medical stuff. I think you set up medical laboratories, and you have, you know, if we had time in the later stuff, there already are robotic doctors who can do an incredible job of diagnosing you and so forth, better than most human doctors, right? And there are robotic doctors who can do surgery really well. People do the really microsurgery by whatever. You can think that a lot of what you'll do for medical treatment is having somebody who supervises machines that help treat diseases, right? So the definition of what a doctor is going to change over time if humans get out of the way. Right now, there are already 5 different companies that make robotic doctors that are able to do diagnosis and prescriptions better than 80 to 85% of human doctors, right? And they're easy to update, and it's easy to do. Anyway, I'm actually very optimistic about healthcare and medicine. I think that's one of the areas where we can do tremendously well, but you're going to select your people to be healthy and whatever it is but you're still going to need a doctor, so it's going to go forward. What I was saying is, my vision of what would happen for a moon base is you wouldn't build a city on the surface. You take advantage of the fact there are tunnels and caves on the moon. You try and find one that's near a water supply, and then you seal it up, right? And you pipe in some solar light or whatever it's like. And you build it there, and then you have room for development and expansion over time. But it has to be a place from which you can have rockets come and land, and then refuel them and send them back in order to make it economical. Because the mistake with the past moon race, and probably the mistake with this, is that, you know, Kennedy set this goal to go to the moon and come back and take the samples, and they did, and we learned a lot scientifically. But then it stopped, right? There hasn't been anybody to the moon for 20-something years. Maybe it's longer than I've forgotten how long it is, but I was young when people went to the moon. I'm not young anymore. The fact is, now I hope when we go to the moon, we actually think about the infrastructure, but there are already a number of companies that have applied for licenses to put up effectively space stations around the moon. And they're thinking about manufacturing and research and other things like that. And so if you think about why do you go to the moon, you go to the moon because it's there and because it has a certain mythology to it. But if you actually want to do some stuff, you'd like to be in space stations where it's low energy cost, right? You have to go down to the moon, cost you energy. You have to come back from the moon, cost you energy, right? The space stations, you're already there. Going back, the Earth isn't a deep potential well. It costs you a lot to get out of that well.
If I may come back, and the minister mentioned as well, we have the International Space Station that's been operating now for 23 years. It's been built by 15 nations that's come together, and over 40 nationalities have been working and collaborating in space, overcoming difficulties that we are facing on Earth. So if you look at space as a peace project, and by the way, the International Space Station was also nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize a couple of years ago. Again, what are the good things that we can bring with us from Earth into space, and what learnings can we have from space that we can bring back on Earth? How can we ensure a more peaceful future on our blue planet as we move forward into?
The answer used to be during the Cold War, the scientific exchanges worked very well because, as Minister Lincoln said, the open collaboration of scientific research has enriched the world for a lot. For the last 20 or 30 years, almost all the increase in GDP in the world has been due to innovations, not more people coming to work, not more resources being brought in. The big fraction came from the improved productivity of using new scientific results and technologies. And that is going to be true in the future. So you want to do that. And during the height of the Cold War, the primary exchange that was going on between the Soviet Union and the West was scientific. That was the main way the thing went back and forth. And that's because it was kind of an international thing to do, and scientific activity was that. And so when I was a young student and a young postdoc, we had visitors from Russia. We had students and postdocs from Russia that came back and forth, and people were being exchanged, even though it was quite a harsh time. And we've been having tremendous exchanges between China and the West. I have a Chinese postdoc who's in Paris. I have graduate students and a postdoc who's a European in Hong Kong, and the others are Chinese. There is a huge international stuff, but I fear, as the minister does, that there's going to be a very serious Cold War and decoupling between China and the West, and we will see what happens. It's a difficult thing, and but things are more subtle than they look. There is some exchanges and stuff going on. There is some handshaking. On the other hand, we didn't let China be part of the International Space Station. That's why China has its own space station, right? Because they were not allowed to be involved in that. And it's subtle and it's behind the scenes. But when it comes to openness of scientific research, it's actually more subtle and more complicated. Just like everything else in life, when you look at it deeply, there are reasons why you want to have some stuff kept privately. Sometimes it's discoveries that people aren't ready, right? I mean, I made a list one time in a talk. I made a list of articles, like, here are the articles I was going to publish, but I thought better of it. How in your home, in your high school lab, you can make, a special virus that is really bad.
Don't publish that one.
And that's, I have a list of like 10 papers like that. The question is, do you want to publish those things? It's principle knowledge that belongs to all humanity, but not all humanity manages to think responsibility. You don't want to you don't want to tempt them by giving them stuff that make them able to do really tremendous damage before they learn how to be mature enough to deal with it. And so open science that way. The other is, while in some areas we face the situation where a much bigger fraction of scientific funding is being done by private sources than public sources, whereas in the older days, most of the funding for scientific research came from public sources, and therefore having the data publicly available was reasonable. Now, these companies that are paying for research don't necessarily want that research out. They want to have the first crack at it so they can commercialize it. And it becomes more and more tricky, because it also creates biases in what results get released, because some of it might hurt the parent company if it turns out that their chemical process hurts people badly or something like that. So it's a tricky thing. Everything, just like building up into space, is idealized in a certain way, but in other ways it's going to be grubby, right? There is everywhere a complicated balance. And so, like patents used to stop things from competing. Now patents incentivize people for a while to be able to make products. But now patents also get in the way of development of things. So there's a lot of companies that have a whole lot of patents on the web or this and that. They use it to block their rivals from making forward. And so we have gotten some kind of delicate balance between what we patent and how long the patent lasts for, and whether we're getting, so it's this tricky thing about, if you don't privatize or commercialize space to a certain extent, you won't get enough funding in it for it to develop. But if you do too much, those companies are going to get too rich and too powerful.
But talking about patterns in a way, there's a shift of power. I would argue that small is the new big. You know, we're seeing how satellites are becoming much more smaller and lighter. They used to be the size of a bus, and they now come down to be maybe like a milk packet or even smaller in terms of nanosats, but also the development of the new technology that you explained to us in reusable spaceships, and spaceships, some of them that start and land like aircraft. This also gives an opportunity to not only more countries, but also smaller countries that actually have their own space programs. So Sweden, for example, you know, we have vast areas of low human density, which is a big challenge for us, but we're using this as a critical asset to actually conduct space activities safely. So now we're aiming to launch both satellites and humans into space. But looking at Singapore as a space destination, what can Singapore aim and strive for? And how can the future leaders that are with us here today, what role can they play in that future?
Okay, so I had one recommendation that I told people, then there are two other recommendations, but the one recommendation that I had is Singapore has strength in being a neutral but honest banking region. And they could gather Asian money, of which there's a lot, and use that to fund it. As I tell you, if I'm a company, a lot of startup companies are trying to get money. Luxembourg is the only place that's trying to make this easy and straightforward. The other people who are going into space already have billions, like Elon and Eutelsat, that list of 7 that I had that are already up there. A lot of them already have a lot of money and they're self-funding. But you know, if you wanna start a good space program, you need funding. That is, you need to get somebody to put together a big bundle of funding and make the judgment as to which companies are going to survive. And that's a really serious money-making business, but it allows for a really good future because you're selecting out which companies are going to go in terms of their technology and in terms of what they're proposing to do, because you're going to do some environmentally sound decision-making in that too. So that's something that Singapore has the position, the political position, and the banking knowledge or the investing knowledge that would be very straightforward and could have a really major impact. Now, Singapore is on the equator. You could conceive that this might be a good place for stuff to come down. You got ships coming here all the time. I'm going to bring down a whole bunch of valuable stuff from space. I want to land it on a barge offshore. You know, I don't know if you've noticed that they made me overrun a little bit of my talk and I didn't have nearly time to show it. But the impressive thing about SpaceX is they have 2 barges, one in the Atlantic, one in the Pacific, and they land the rockets vertically on them, okay? When you see it, you can't believe it. Now you've seen it 10 times. There's one that's launched 14 times and landed on the barge, right? You can land, you can be a spaceport, because being on the equator is great. Launching from here is a little tricky, but having stuff land here is relatively straightforward. Then you need to figure out where to take that rocket by barge to launch it again. But being on the equator is a tremendous advantage because the rotational speed of the Earth helps you get up to space. It's an extra boost. That's why the European Launch Center is in French Guiana. It's because it's close to the equator. And so it's potential there. That's a lot more infrastructure, but it's not on the unbelievable scale that it is something that Singapore could do. The next thing is there are going to be certain industries that are needed to support the space industries, and you could specialize in some of those, but it's not clear who your competitors are going to be and what's going to go on. But it's having a highly educated workforce that knows technical stuff. You need to have some of those people in order to make judgments about which companies are actually going to succeed in making the money in space to bring part of the $1 trillion here. And so those are things that could be done, but by far, in my view, the most straightforward thing is, raise the money, have these guys parade in, give their pitches for what job they're going to do in space, whether it's put up another internet service, so it's a pretty busy field. Or somebody who's got a really clever way to do the asteroid mining efficiently and effectively, and so forth. So there are a number of things you can think about. There's even space medicine.
I know.
for your daughter. That's knowing about some of the aspects. Space, space is not so perfectly good for human bodies. That's why a moon base might be a place where you have a large moon or Mars base where you can have a large population. I'm in favor of automating as much stuff on space stations as you can.
So Singapore could be the space capital, double meaning there, of the world. But looking at the development of satellites again, and looking also at what you showed us in terms of space debris. I mean, satellites are very much, our way of living. It's part of our life, and space technology. And it's how we learn about changes on Earth and how we also monitor climate change. But with increasing number of satellites being sent out, how can we ensure that the debris doesn't become a problem? And looking back over the 50 years of space activities that we have and the number of objects already, how can we, and what is already being done to mitigate space debris and space
Okay, there's a thing called the Kessler Cascade, which some of you may not know, but if you saw the movie, I've forgotten the name of the movie, Gravity.
Yeah.
If you saw it with Clooney and, I forgot her name, can't believe it. Anyway, she's
Sandra Bullock.
Sandra Bullock. She's the astronaut out there, and it's unrealistic because somehow the International Space Station and the Chinese Space Station are in the same plane. But anyway, if you look at what goes on, and this is predicted by Kessler maybe 20 years ago now, if you have two satellites crash into each other, they don't just go bang like a billiard ball, they smatter into lots of pieces. And I did a calculation some years ago, and when I calculated, once in every 10 years, the space station would be hit by something big enough to punch a hole in it, and then they have to fix it. And in fact, that has happened approximately. And a paint fleck moving at 15,000 kilometers an hour will punch through steel, right? It'll punch through aluminum easily. And so there's a lot of paint flecks just from paint flecking off of satellites. There's paints to keep them from getting too hot in the sun, and over time the thermal cycling gets them. But every country, starting I think with the Soviet Union, and then the United States, and then China, has wanted to show their adversaries they can take out satellites, and they have all run anti-sat tests, and they have created an immense amount of debris in space, and it takes a long time, decades to come down out of that because of the residual atmospheric drag. However, there was and I expect India to do this, even though in principle there's a treaty that people don't do any more ASAT tests, and they have to have plans to deorbit their satellites so they won't keep committing. There's over 5,000 satellites up now. More than half of them have been dead for a long time. However, less than a year ago, I saw an event that I thought was very political. It's clear that Putin got debriefed about what Starlink was doing and realized Starlink had up 10 times as many satellites as he did, and he didn't have a prayer of putting his many up. And that was a threat because it could provide a direct link by cell phone to people inside of Russia, and he couldn't control the media. And so he had a strategy which is, if I can destroy it, I can control it. And so he had an anti-satellite test that created what I would call a belt around the Earth of debris particles, which is slowly spreading out. But it was designed to be at an altitude that it didn't come out quite the way he wanted it, but it barely missed the space station. The space station actually had to move orbits in order to do it. It missed the Chinese space station by a little bit, but they had to move a couple of the Starlink satellites So they'd be at a slightly different altitudes when it passed through, that kind of stuff. Because it's going in a big loop around the Earth, and these other satellites are going in different loops. They're going to cross each other. So if you can't knock down 12,000 satellites, because you can't afford that many ASATs, you've got to think of ways of denying space to the whole human race.
But if I may jump in there, George, because I think you know what Russia did was completely irresponsible, right? But if we look at the upside of you know, the constellation, new satellites and constellations of satellites, and the notion that actually 40% of the population isn't connected to the internet, and that we, through these constellations and a smartphone,
no, it's very clear. It's very clear at least 3 of these internet providers are going to make it possible for every human being on Earth to be connected.
The World Wide Web is finally
provided they have
worldwide.
a smartphone or a smartwatch, right?
So to summarize, if you look into the future, 50 years from now, where are we as a human species? Are we on Mars? Did we have the base on the moon? Have we started mining asteroids? And again, what good learnings have we brought with us from the blue planet to the red?
You know, the future is really hard to predict. However, I would bet that we're very active and busy in space. Whether we'll have a Mars colony by then or not, 50 years is a long time, so there's a reasonable chance, right? That's in your lifetime, young folks, and so forth. I see Adam trying to run us off. I was going to tell you about my dream, you know, but I'll only tell you the first part of the dream, then we'll maybe cut the first part of the dream is I was having this sort of lucid dream, and I imagined my life fast forwarding for the next 20 years. And I've cut down the amount of talks and stuff that I go to, but I spend a lot of time exercising and taking care of my health and eating right and thinking and watching what's going on in the climate change, which is bad. You know, it's not going to be pretty. And because we already know what the future is going to be like, we only got to make it better than it's going to be if we don't do something. And watching how space develops. Right? And the second part of my dream was one of the 4 trillionaires on the Earth, 3 of them made their $1 trillion in the space, you know, contacts me and says, remember when I went to your talk back in 2016 and you said, this is the asteroid I'd pick for mining and so forth. Well, I did, you know, and so I'd like to get you, you know, healthy and take you to see the asteroid mining operation. Of course, I want to go to space, so I'm going, okay, even though I'm old, really old, because I've been seeing my body decay, and even though I'm struggling, and he said, well, you know what I can do? Even though there's a Cold War between us and China, I can get your T cells out of China, right? So I'd given consulting with a company about making a cryogenic system that was fail-safe.
How do we bring that into the future?
Right, and I gave them some T cells in case I needed the T cell treatments in the future. I was thinking I was needing them. He says, I can get them for you. Being a trillionaire and from space, he thought he was above a lot of stuff on the Earth. He could get across the political divides. And yeah, he got that. And got me a personal trainer and everything, and got me all set to go to space.
Excellent.
Right.
Thank you.
And I'll tell you the second half of the dream, but then that's the bad part.
You landed on Mars and you died there, but just not on impact. No, but
if Adam would let us, I will tell you the second half, because then it'll just freak everybody
out. That will be the cliffhanger for this afternoon's talk, I think.
We're supposed to stick to the future we want together, not the future we don't.
No, this is my point with this whole thing is we're getting the future we make, right? And if we don't choose to make a good future, we're not going to get a good future. If we choose to make a good future, we'll get a partially good future because humans aren't perfect.
Indeed, but I think we're at the dawn of such an exciting time ahead of us. We've learned that the sky is no longer the limit, and it is for us to shape. And we've also learned that as space is no longer in the domain of governments only, but it's being accessible to corporates, entrepreneurs, to startups, to investors, and not least students. You know, the stars are very much within our reach. Thank you so much, George.
You can join everyone else and go for lunch. Thank you very much indeed. Sorry we've overrun. That's it for now. We're going to restart at 12:15, which isn't very long. Those with lunch tickets, laureates and speakers, please follow the staff to the lunch boxes. And we will see you back here at 12:15. Thank you all very much indeed.